Music. Rock music, funk, soul, jazz. All of these different music genres. Really, do we need genres? I mean, why are they there? They're there to sell the music to us, aren't they? They want to con us into thinking that we're part of some sort of group or tribe, that we're a fan of certain style of music. Maybe we're a heavy metal fan, or maybe we're an indie fan. And in the old days, you could then walk into your record shop and saunter up to the section that said heavy metal and siphon through it, knowing that you would never be polluted by any other sort of music style because you had become a member of that club. And that was done by the record companies to sell stuff to us, wasn't it? Really, if you think about it. Very few people tend to like music artists from all sorts of different styles, and there's certain styles of music people won't go near. So it all gets a bit tribal. But there's another way that the music industry actually markets itself to us, and that is through the use of conformity. For all their protestations that they are, championing all these sort of countercultural revolutionary types who, want to stick it to the man. In the end, the way they get us to buy records is by going, well, everyone else likes its record. Now you're probably thinking, well, they don't do that, but they do. Because that is the only reason why you would ever have a chart. Why would you even have a chart? Why do we need to know who sold the most records this week or who had the most downloads? What does it really matter? I mean, would you read a book based upon more people have read that book that week than anybody else, or watch a film because more people, maybe some people would, I don't know. I find this all very confusing. But once you have a chart, you have people who get to the top of those charts. And we had a division, really, didn't we? Because what was really important was the singles charts. But as we're all aware on, for viewers of this channel, we know it was the albums that were more important, wasn't it? And the albums tended to be bands, or we could call them artists, couldn't we? But the fact is that they weren't the ones that got world famous, were they? No, it was the ones who sold the singles. It was the ones who got to the top of the singles charts. What did singles matter? Did the singles matter to you? I bought singles for about a year when I first started to get into music. Once I started buying albums, I never bought any singles ever again, or I did a few every now and then. But they don't really matter, do they? They were throwaway. Here today, gone tomorrow. It's a very odd one, this is, I find. The idea of the pop chart, the idea of the singles pop chart being so important, and that we would all gravitate around it, here in the United Kingdom every Thursday we'd have Top of the Pops, and the whole family would gather around to find out who had sold the most records that week. Now, I don't want to get into the fact that, certain record labels knew which shops were being monitored so they could go and buy singles from that shop particularly and get their record into the charts. I once was involved in a band as a lecturer, and they somehow, using some complex technological method, were able to put their single on a free... one of them cards you put in your phone, SIM cards. And so they would give these away at the gigs, and when people put the SIM cards in their phone and got that free bit of money, it downloaded their single. And they got into the top 40 by doing that. So there's always been different ways of conning it. It doesn't really matter, but these people, they become the pop stars. And pop stars are really important. Now, the idea of considering a pop star on my channel is, we're never going to really, but I thought we should. I thought there should be a video in here where I deal with the phenomenon of the pop star. And this popped into my mind, to excuse the pun, because Billboard, which of course in America is the organisation that works out all these charts and is now a website, billboard.com, and put articles out, and now trying to drag us in much the same way as I try and drag you in here with top 10s or top this or this and that, So Billboard keep doing these different lists, don't they? And they've done a list, and it's called The Greatest Pop Star by Year, 1981 to 2025. And I want to read what they've put on their website. This list is a project that the Billboard staff initially published in 2019 and which we've updated in some form every year since. The Billboard staff, I mean, what's that? I mean, you could picture a room full of like nerdy musician types with huge record collections. You know, people like me, you know, people like you, and we're all sat there, we've got charts out and measurements and calculators, and there we are going, who could it be? But I don't think it's that, do you? No, I don't think it's that. I think it's a bunch of kids, really, that got a job there because they're friends with someone in the company, you know, posh kids, and they sit there, you know, going, who should we put on? Quite arbitrarily. Why do I think this? Well, my dad used to be... he was a director of a company, and when he left that company, he got involved doing sort of... he was working for some company that was, you know, one of these companies where they go in and sort your company out. What are they called? You know, that... see, as you can see, I've just got up to do this one, and my brain's not quite in gear, to be honest. Consultant. And because he was part of this consultancy firm, I think one of the big newspapers came up and said, we want you to come up with the 100 most important businessmen of that year. And my dad said they just basically sat down and just made them up. There was no measurement or working out. It was just two blokes thinking. It was just their opinion. It's just opinions, isn't it? Anyway, in honour of our associated greatest pop stars of the 20th century list finally nearing its conclusion, we are republishing this project, now updated in 2025. It's talking about it's like some sort of, I don't know, some sort of academic, you know, study. Check it out here and be sure to catch up on our entire 2025 Greatest Pop Stars Top 10. We've got to do that. Well, the thing is, I was interested in this because it does it year by year. And as they say, pop stardom is in many ways a competitive sport. Not one that demands a lone winner as justification for the whole enterprise exactly, but one that still entrances those of us watching from the sidelines to see who'll come out on top. Nobody is there. This is what I'm saying. They put this in your mind. Well, not your mind, but people's mind. They say, oh, as though we all sat there waiting to know this knowledge. This knowledge is not important. So why are you doing it, Andy? Because the same thing here, any sort of list. You know, if I put up the, how many, it's going to be a lot. So I say the 40 greatest pop stars, no, or the greatest pop stars of the last 40 years. People are going to click on it. 7 to 1. It's like a strange conformity. So anyway, what they say here is they've looked at who was number one, who outsold who was playing the biggest venues, who racked up the most Grammys, BBMAs, VMAs, right? And they've come up with this list, and every single year they have got the biggest pop star for that year. And I have got the list here, and I'm going to go through it and say how much it bloody matters, right? Because when I look at the list of artists that we have over the last 45 years, really, what does it say about us? If we were to look at the greatest albums or the greatest bands of all time, I think we're looking at something that does denote some level of quality. And although there is quality here, none of it really is in that realm of going, oh my God, yeah, this is heavyweights. This is what I feel going through this list. So reading through this list this morning, I found it quite interesting. Now, I'm an older man, as you may have noticed, and as I went through this list, I asked myself, do I know who this person is? Can I name a song by them? And do I own a record by them? That was the 3 questions I asked. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through this list so you get to find out what the list is here without having to read anything. And I'm going to tell you how much I know them and what I know about them. And I'm going to also then tell you whether I think this artist deserves to be on a list of anything, really. You know, to be going down in history as being the greatest of what. You know, we'll have a chat about that. So I'm going to be looking at more of the bottom, you know, based upon their legacy and influence, I suppose. But of course, once you're at the pop end, especially the singles end and that sort of cultural end, these artists are the end results of innovation, not the innovators themselves. So it'd be interesting to see if we can class any of these as innovators. Maybe they're innovators in the world of pop starness. Who knows? Could be the case. Right, so shall we kick off? So, 1981, we have Blondie, the band Blondie, right? Quite an interesting choice here, because I think Debbie Harry is almost like, that's a cultural shift. When she comes out fronting what is basically a new wave band that's come out of the back of punk, albeit really polished to, pop star, glitteriness, but still a band. But Debbie Harry herself is really the first of what we could call the sort of female pop starlet, isn't it? She's going to be, she's the first in a long row of pop stars. And now every single pop star, from Madonna to Christina Aguilera to whoever it is to Lady Gaga, has a little bit of Blondie in their DNA. So in that result, I think Debbie Harry in herself is very important in terms of really laying the ground for the female pop star going into the 1980s. I think Blondie were a fantastic band. I think that they produced a whole bunch of brilliant singles, and I think Parallel Lines is a classic album, brilliant album. So yes, I do know who Blondie is. Yes, I could name a song by them. Call Me, for example. Union City Blues. There's another one for you. So I can name a song by them. Do I own an album? Well, I've got a jazz album. It's something Passengers. It's quite good. It's a jazz album with Debbie Harry singing on it. I do believe I owned a copy of Deaf, Dumb and Blonde at one point, because Terry Bozzio played drums on it. And years ago, I did have a copy of Parallel Lines, and I think a couple of other Blondie albums. But at the moment, Individual Passengers, is that the album? I still own that, so I still technically own a Blondie album. And the fact that we have a pop star here who in her older years is venturing off to do some, strange jazz with a coterie of sort of New York avant-garde jazz musicians, which I think is what it is. And I liked it at the time. I thought it was a great album. So that's interesting that she has that range, which she does, of course, and she was in film. So I think Blondie, it's a good one to start the 1980s. She almost defines, because obviously her hits were happening in the late 70s, and she was at a sort of cultural peak in 1981 because she was starring in various films at that time, wasn't she? I think she was in a film called Union City, and when did she do Videodrome for David Cronenberg, a very strange film, and very strange to think Blondie was in it now when I think of it. But yes, so the Blondie's 1981, fair enough. 1982, this one's a surprise. We've got John Cougar Mellencamp. Now, John Cougar Mellencamp in my country of England, we don't really know about him. Nobody really listens to John Cougar Mellencamp. I think if you went out to the street and mentioned John Cougar Mellencamp to most people, he'd have to walk a long way before anyone ever heard of him. I know him because in the old days, I used to go and do drum clinics with the great Kenny Aronoff, who is one of the great session drummers of all time, but he made his name playing for John Cougar Mellencamp, who I seem to remember was simply called John Cougar. Is that right? And now he's John Mellencamp. Right, so I do know who he is. And I know that he had a big hit record with something called Jack and Diane. And I know there's a cool drum fill in there that Kenny did. And I don't own any records by him. And I really find it surprising that they picked him for 1982 with the artists that were around at that time, sort of laying the ground for a new type of pop music. John Cougar Mellencamp, is he influential? I don't know. Is he like a cut price Bruce Springsteen? I don't know. Don't know much about him. I'm surprised he's on this list. I mean, all the other people on this list for the 1980s are household names, I would say. And I'm surprised 1982 we didn't get Michael Jackson, because Thriller came out in 1982. But what we have in 1983 is Michael Jackson, who is probably the greatest pop star of all time and an incredible artist, innovatory, really incredible. It takes some time to get going. His background in the Jackson 5 and in Motown means, it's very middle of the road, although some of those early Jackson 5 singles are brilliant. I think when the Jacksons did Blame It on the Boogie, there seems to be a change, and Michael Jackson steps forward. Off the Wall is just a masterpiece. Thriller's a masterpiece. Bad's great. He's a truly great artist, incredibly talented, and almost defines what a pop star is. And so we have him at 1983, which of course was the year following Thriller, and he's out on tour, and he really was the biggest artist of all time. 1984, we have Prince. Now, Prince, of course, again, is an incredible pop star, but also an innovatory. Is that a word? Innovatory. He's a musician that, was a leader musically. He wasn't just a pop star, a great musician in his own right, a great songwriter in his own right, but also someone that took the sort of 70s funk and soul, and by bringing in a sort of almost like industrial, synth aesthetic, moved that to a sound that became sort of ubiquitous in the 1980s. Of course, in 1984, he brought out the film Purple Rain, which was a huge hit. He was never able to do it again. I think it was a bit of a fluke. It seemed to be the right film at the right time, and he became the biggest pop star in the world. It's quite surprising that Prince did, because he could be quite a dark artist. The stuff is quite weird sometimes, But this just shows that the 1980s at this point was producing incredible pop music, especially in that first half of the decade. Prince, yes, I know him. Yes, I can name a tune by him, Kiss, for example. And yes, I've got many albums by Prince, probably about 10 or 12, and I've done a whole video on Prince. 1985, we've got Madonna. Now, I think that Madonna is musically much greater than some people think. I've always been a big fan of Madonna. I've done a video on her here where I've gone through a lot of those songs. They're great songs. And when you look into the creation of those songs, she has always been involved in the songwriting process. She really defines, in the same way as Michael Jackson defines the sort of male pop star in the 1980s, she defines the female pop star. And to be honest, her definition of that, which obviously comes out of, Debbie Harry, that's there, isn't it, of course? But the way she sets out, it's like every single female pop star of note has had to follow her trajectory, including becoming quite salacious and sexual. This is the beginning of that, I think. And she pushes the boundaries on that too, where you had a mainstream pop star liked by basically teenagers, sort of bringing out videos that were getting banned. Remember Justify My Love? And then they brought it out on video cassette and everyone went out to buy it. And then she did that sex book. She's a very strange artist, Madonna is. And she occupies her own realm, but you can't argue with, Vogue or Like a Prayer. These are just phenomenal pop records. So yeah, she's well deserved in 1985. But I would put forth this idea in 1985, because I thought, well, Phil Collins will be on this list at some point, and he's not. Phil Collins was he was the biggest thing in 1985. It's weird to call him a pop star. Phil Collins is a staple of this channel, isn't it? He's a progressive rock legend, drumming with Brand X and Genesis and doing sessions with Brian Eno. But, by the mid-80s, he was also the biggest pop star in the world at that point. With his No Jacket Required album, sort of ubiquitous to any yuppie at that time who would have to own a copy of that. So why not Phil Collins? Is there... At this point, rock and roll has aged, and we now have pop stars that are in their 40s, 50s, and they're not as cool as the Madonnas who are in their 20s. And so we don't have any older pop stars in this list. And they were there, weren't they? They were all there at that time. Eric Clapton was having hit records. Stevie Winwood was having hit records. Peter Gabriel was having hit records. Where are they? Would they get considered? I don't know. 1986, for me, there was a shift in popular music, both in my country and in the US, and things started to get a little smoother. and a little bit more middle of the road. And the artist that emerged in 1986, which represents that for me, is Whitney Houston. Now, Whitney Houston, of course, in the early days was produced by, my hero and a friend of this channel, Narada Michael Walden. Whitney was so gifted as a singer. And although a lot of those early songs were very pop, and I think she herself wanted to do something that was heavier, funkier, harder, more soulful, closer to a Shaka Khan record than what she was doing. But she was able to cross over that boundary, which of course was still in 1986 a thing. Black artists were having to cross over. If we did this list into the 1970s, I don't think we'd have any black artists as being the pop stars of that decade. But here, I think we've got about 50%, I would say. Maybe not, actually. I say that. We've got Prince, Michael Jackson and Whitney. That's it, 3. So a third. Interesting. Whitney Houston as a singer was absolutely incredible. She looked amazing. She performed amazing. And she, in her voice, went right back to Mahalia Jackson and, right back to Aretha Franklin. She was a heavyweight artist in that sort of old-fashioned 1950s way, really. But she was something else. 1987, we've got a band, Bon Jovi. Now, Bon Jovi can be seen as the pop end of that sort of whole hair metal thing that was plugging away all through the 1980s. That actually a lot of these pop star types were having to work against. MTV was much more about, selling, rock bands than it was putting out black artists, like Michael Jackson. That was a shift that had to happen. Bon Jovi, I think... I remember 1987 when this album came out, and I can remember going up the pub and everyone had these T-shirts on, and all the girls had the T-shirts on. This was the big difference. And I can remember the girls loved John Bon Jovi. I think that was a big thing where he really did cross over. So that's 1987. Oh, yes, I forgot to say, Whitney Houston. I do know who she is. I can say a record by her. I Want to Dance With Somebody. There proved it. I know one of her records. And I do own a record. I actually featured it on a video recently on Gong, because I have an album by Material called One Down, where she does a version of Memories, which was written by Hugh Hopper. And she's accompanied by the great free jazz saxophonist Archie Shepp. It's one of the strangest collaborations in music history. In terms of Bon Jovi, yeah, I know they are. I could mention a song by them, Like a Prayer. Do I own anything by them? No, I don't. 1988, we have the first British person on the list, and that's George Michael, who had come to fame in the British pop band Wham, and then had gone solo and had brought out the album Faith, which then became the biggest album at that time. George Michael was an incredible talent, an incredibly charismatic pop star with an incredible voice and a brilliant songwriter, the full package, an absolutely wonderful musician, completely worthy of this list, and a tragic musician that died far too young. Yes, I know who he is. Yes, I could name a tune by him. I just did Faith is a tune, Jesus, is it Jesus to a Boy? That's an incredible tune, isn't it? Do I own anything by George Michael? I don't think I do, and I feel like I'm lacking. Actually, now I thought that I should pick up a best of. Right, 1989, we see Madonna again. So that's the 1980s, and I think out of these, in terms of important artists that I think deserve to be there, Blondie, Michael Jackson, Prince, Madonna, Whitney, George Michael. About half of them are pretty serious artists. Now we move into the 90s. For 1990, they've got Janet Jackson, the little sister of Michael Jackson. I remember in the 1980s, she came out with a record, and it had that track on, What Have They Done With You Lately? Remember that? There was a few. I thought it was really 80s sounding production, but it was, you never heard production like that before. And that sort of set up as herself. She had her own sound, which I think was quite interesting. And then she becomes one of the biggest stars in the world after Michael. And at some point she does, I think, the most expensive bloody record of all time, isn't it? With that duet she does with her brother Scream. I think Janet Jackson is okay. I think as a singer, as a songwriter, I don't think there's that much there. She happened to be Michael Jackson's little sister, and she happened to have a great producer. And if someone's got the right image, or they've got a reason to be in the limelight and a good producer, and she maintained that for a while. And I remember she had an album out in 1990, which was probably the last gasp at these type of pop stars before the whole grunge thing happened and the world changed. And the idea of the pop star diminishes in the mid-90s. Our pop stars are slightly different then. And you can see it when we moved to, through this list. But in 1991, the biggest pop star of that year was Mariah Carey. Again, produced by Narada Michael Walden. Again, a sort of carbon copy in a way of Whitney Houston. An incredible singer, an unbelievable singer with an ability very, very rare, and almost like defines what we think of as the sort of great singer. You know, every singer that wants to get up on, you know, Pop Idol or whatever it is, Britain's Got Talent or America's Got Talent, and get up and blow everybody away. They're going to do what Mariah does, which is lots of emotion, building up to some high notes and then hitting a real high note. And of course she could hit notes that only dogs could hear. Later on in the 90s, she moved to having a much more raunchier image, and she made records with Busta Rhymes. I got to be honest, there was a whole bunch of records that came out, and I can hear them in my head, but I couldn't tell you the titles of them. There's a bit of a facelessness when she's huge at this point. Of course, there's the Christmas song, isn't there? I can't actually remember what that title of that one is. I probably obliterated it in my mind, you know, having Christmas just a few months ago. Can't remember it, but so, yeah. I think she's incredible but bland. And I don't think she has the credentials of some of the greats we've had before. A bit like Janet Jackson. This is like the record company find equivalents of what they had before, in a way. Janet Jackson's like their version of Michael Jackson, and Mariah Carey is their version of Whitney Houston. 1992, we have Nirvana. My God, for a rock band to come through like that, to not just reach the top of the rock pile, but actually reach the top of the pile, right? To be seen as a pop star, influencing. Do you remember, like, the fashion industry changed and it went all grungy? Do you remember? Why? Because Kurt Cobain was so ridiculously handsome. Something that never gets mentioned. He truly was a charismatic pop star. And it could have been that he couldn't deal with. Something that they never expected to happen with that album. So that, for me, shows a certain shift that happens in the 90s, which isn't really shown on this list, because in 1993 we get Janet Jackson again. Right? And then 1994 we see a shift on this list with the inclusion of Boys to Men. Boys to Men is the first on this list of the sort of girl band or boy band. We didn't need these, did we? This was the shift away, I think, from rock music. Way before downloading and streaming happened, way before any of this happened, there was a shift away from rock music. And it begins here in the mid-90s. And it creates a style of pop music which I think has then atrophied and never shifted since. I think this is the point where I'm going to start going, I don't really know these artists. That they really start to become faceless. So we can see the join up there, can't we? You know, between, you know, Whitney Houston, George Michael, Madonna, and then we get Janet Jackson, Mariah Carey, Janet Jackson, and we got Nirvana in there, which is like the death knell of rock, isn't it? The last gasp, the last fiery gasp of rock music before it became a cliche. We are really just mapping the death of the whole thing here, and it goes back to 30 years this has been going on. So yeah, 1993 we got Janet Jackson, 1994 we got Boys to Men. Now Boys to Men, I know they're a boy band. I couldn't tell you anything they've ever done. Obviously, I don't own an album by them. I know nothing about them. They're quite faceless. I don't think I could point them out if you put them in with a whole bunch of other boy bands at that period. I wouldn't be able to tell you which one's Boys to Men and which one's NSYNC, right? Who I'm sure is going to turn up at some point in here. Do they come on later? I don't know. In 1995, we've got TLC. Now, I do know a song by them because they did a song I really like called Waterfalls. That's a great tune, that is. Did TLC have Lisa Left Eye Lopez? I thought she was great. They were cooler for a sort of girl band, and they had some great songs. But for that to be represented in 1995, 1996, we see the commercial end of grunge with Alanis Morissette. That is the record companies reacting to grunge and packaging it up into some sort of pop star. And Alanis Morissette, I've never really got. There's only really one album that anybody knows. Do I know a song by her? Yes, I know that tune, Ironic. I'm not a fan of her whatsoever. And I'm really surprised she's the biggest pop star of 1996. She's almost like, we're never going to see anybody like that again on this list. No, nobody with the band and guitars. That's that. 1997, the biggest pop star of 1997 was Puff Daddy. There we mark. Can you see there's the descent here? There is a descent into crud. Puff Daddy is not an artist. He was, just a guy that stood next to famous people to try and get famous himself. And when his friend got killed, Biggie Smalls, he did a terrible cover version of The Police's Every Breath You Take, which didn't understand the nature of the song. That became a worldwide hit, and then off of that he was able to build a pop career which he could have never had, because he wasn't a great rapper and he wasn't a great producer, and was part of the industry in a way that was quite horrible, and I always knew it. But now obviously he's in prison for his horrible parties and all the horrible things he's been up to. Can you see from 1987 we've got Bon Jovi, 1997, 10 years later, it was Puff Daddy. The following year, 1998, Backstreet Boys. Boys to Men, Backstreet Boys. Boys to Men were more street, weren't they? I remember now they were a little bit heavier, a little bit in the style of a sort of Temptations, weren't they? A little bit more black music, soul. Backstreet Boys were really the beginning of the sort of pretty boys dancing around, ripping their shirts off and all that type of thing. And then in 1999, they've got Britney Spears. Now, all these artists here, I don't own any records by. I do own Britney Spears records. I was doing my own production at that point, and I was a big fan of certain records for their production. And I can remember I bought Toxic. No, it wasn't Toxic. It was I'm a Slave for You, that was produced by, Pharrell Williams, NERD. And so there's some great songs there with Britney Spears. I think she, for me, in 1999, spells the death of whatever I liked in music. Way back then. And this is when the record industry is at its peak. This is the point where we get the biggest sales ever in the history of the music industry. It's around about 2000. Right, and Britney Spears heralds that. So, as we go into the 2000s, we get NSYNC for 2000. Again, is that the one with Justin Timberlake in? Now, he was a talent, I believe. A talented man. I'm sure he's going to appear later on. 2001, we've got Jennifer Lopez. Not a great singer, an actor. We'd had Shakira at this point, hadn't we? So we get that sort of Hispanic influence into the pop charts at that point. Jennifer Lopez being one of those. Representing that, I should have said, I bought Play, her record, because I was obsessed with it, and I still love it to this day. I don't know why I like it so much, but I do like it very much. Play. Great tune. Anyway, but these aren't great artists at all, and the actual vocal talent seems to be diminishing as we go down this list. 2002 was the year of Eminem. This is the second rap artist to make it onto here, the first being Puff Daddy. The second being Eminem. Eminem is a truly great artist. He's an innovator. He's incredibly talented. I rate him extremely highly. And I was clever enough to buy his first single, My Name Is, when it came out. I spotted how great he was. And of course, I was probably pulled in by that incredible riff. Oh, my name is, my name is, which was funky. And who did that riff? Of course, it was off the Labi Siffre record, featuring on piano and drums and bass or whatever it was, Chaz and Dave, the great British Cockney band. I love that fact, and I will tell it over and over again on this channel. But Eminem's great. I think he's a great artist here, and as I go through this, because we've got a long way to go, because if we're looking at sort of the last 45 years, we're not even halfway yet. I know, it's a bit tedious, but I'll go a bit faster now. 2003, we get Beyonce, coming out of her band, Destiny's Child, one of the better sort of girl bands. They all had star appeal. She had the most appeal. The band had really been created to push her. She comes out. She also starts to do film roles, all sorts of different things. And Beyonce has been there for the last 25 years now, and made some good records. She's a good singer. She's definitely got a ton of charisma. That's got no problem with Beyonce. When she came out with I can't remember. I did buy her first single. I'm crazy right now. Mama never done the crazy right now. Crazy Right Now, is that what it's called? I like the drum sample on it, which I believe was what was that taken from? There's not much facts here. I as you can see, if we go 25 years back, for someone who's been a massive fan of music and studied the history of it, I'm floundering now. I really have no interest in any of this, and I can't really pull stuff that I thought I was going to be able to when I started this video up. So 2004, we get Usher, some rapper bloke. I can't remember any songs he did. 2005, we get Kanye West. He emerges 20 years ago. 20 years ago, he was big enough for Billboard to say he was the biggest pop star at that time. I don't get him at all again. He seems a creative fellow, but he seems off his head. I could name a song by him because he did that Hitler song, didn't he? Heil Hitler, was it? I mean, what are we talking about here? 2006, we get Justin Timberlake. He emerges at that point. He brings out the album Justified, which I loved, again, produced by Pharrell, and I went out and bought. So I'm still in the game, 2006. Some of these artists I'm still listening to and buying stuff by. 2007, we get Rihanna. I know who she is. She did a tune called My Umbrella or something like that. 2008, we got a rapper called Lil Wayne. I know who he is. He's a little ratty fellow with face tattoos, isn't he? I don't know anything about him. 2009, we get Lady Gaga. It's surprised how long ago these artists are. Yeah, I know who Lady Gaga is. Again, he's following that Madonna route. She comes out, she's made films, she's done this, very theatrical, blah, blah, blah. It owes a lot to Madonna. Also owes a lot to Missing Persons and Dale Bozio, doesn't she? She almost like took her image from her, but let's not go there, shall we? 2010, Katy Perry. Is she British? She is, isn't she? She went out with Russell Brand, didn't she, old Katy Perry? I don't know anything about these people. 2011, Adele. Adele came off the back of, for me, Amy Winehouse. The label signed up a whole bunch of people at that point. Amy Winehouse goes off the rails, so she's not there. Who was the real talent? Adele is a great singer. She came out with some good songs. I'm really surprised that she's been able to, turn that into becoming one of the biggest artists in the world, especially for a British artist who is still there now, one of the biggest artists in the world. It's really surprising. 2012, we got Rihanna again. 2013, Miley Cyrus, who I assume that's the year she came out with that video where she's on the back of that ball thing. What was it called? Not Thunderball. Wrecking Ball. Remember that Wrecking Ball with her in the nud? That's Billy Ray Cyrus's daughter. What's she doing in the nud on the back of a bloody big massive ball, smashing stuff down? I don't know, but it'll make her the biggest pop star of 2013. 2014, we see the first appearance of Taylor Swift. She possibly came out with that year with that first single that was really good, or the first big single she'd ever done. I can't remember the title of it. This is really bad. Come on. They featured the song in that film with the elephant singing. What have you turned up to watch? There's quite a lot of information early on, but I really am trying to show you how much I don't know about modern pop music, modern music. You know, I'm sure people know who these people are. I don't know much about Taylor Swift, really. I've done a video on her at some point. You know, I probably did some research at that time. But come on, what was her big single that everybody's heard of, Andy? You can remember it. Come on. It's in that film with the elephant that sings, you know. All the animals get together to do a sort of a show to save the theatre that's run by that little koala bear thing. What's that film called? Come on, you need to get some solid information here on this video. You need to work your way down to something that you can build this all up from. There's a whole host of good songs in that, isn't there? You know, the goat thing, she sings Golden Slumbers, doesn't she? And there's a gorilla that sings an Elton John song. And is it not the pig that sings the Taylor Swift song? And what Taylor Swift song's that, Andy? Come on. No, I thought I could catch myself out and work out what it was. Yeah, I've got the internet right here. I could look it up, but I'm not going to, because I really wanted to just stumble to the end of this video and you see an old bloke not knowing anything about contemporary culture for the last 25 years. Taylor Swift, come on, what was the record she did? I did it at college. I learnt it, worked on the students with it. We did a show in a primary school for the little kids, and so we picked this tune. It went down very well. I'm going to move on. Because in 2015 we got Drake. I don't even know what Drake is. It's a bloke, isn't it? It's a Drake. I know he's a Canadian rapper. I don't know why I know that. Drake. Do I know anything by him? No. Who is he? If you said Drake to me, I'm going to think like Gabrielle Drake or Nick Drake or most likely Charlie Drake. Those three Drakes are far more memorable. I'm far more knowledgeable about Charlie Drake than I am about Drake the rapper. In 2016, we have Beyonce again. And 2017, we get Ed Sheeran. Now, I did own an Ed Sheeran album. I did smash it up on one of the videos as a bit of entertainment for you. He does change the music industry a little bit. Ed Sheeran does. He ugly blokes playing songs they've written on guitar. He brings that back. You know how much we wanted that. I didn't want that back at all. You know. I mean, we'd got Damien Rice, he'd tried to do it, he didn't achieve it. We'd had a few others come out, ugly blokes. But he opens the door to people like James Blunt, doesn't he? It's a whole horrible, we're in a horrible realm. Ed Sheeran, the world would be better off if he hadn't have emerged, I believe. You ever see that film yesterday when, they said the Beatles didn't exist, it shows you the effect. Well, ironically, Ed Sheeran's in that film. Because he does exist, and so he exists in the film, but they have the real Ed Sheeran. It's ever so strange. They got the real Ed Sheeran in there, but can you imagine making the film where Ed Sheeran didn't exist, and what would have happened? There'd be no ugly blokes in the charts. That's it. 2018, we get Drake again. And then 2019, finishing off the last decade, we get Billie Eilish. Now, Andy, come on. You must be able to name a Billie Eilish tune. I know there's one where she cried black tears of woe, didn't she? The black tears of woe. And then there's the one where they took the hook off it, which was that horrible keyboard hook. Boop, 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 whatever it was, and it was on every single advert. What was that called? No. Now, come on. I'm a massive music fan. I have watched on TV all these tunes. I've heard them on the radio. Why are they not going into my memory bank? You know what my memory banks are like. I've got a large amount of memory banks for music. Why is it once we get now to the last 10 years, I can't tell you any song they've ever done? But where does it get to the point where I don't know who they are at all? Well, 2020 we get Taylor Swift again. That's ridiculous. It's as though there's no one of any sort of real value. And so Taylor Swift, who's sort of okay and would never have cut it in the 1980s up against Prince or Madonna, but now, because she's a reasonable songwriter and she's got a fan base, she keeps coming back because there's nothing else to challenge her, because this is just going down the pan. 2021 we have Olivia Rodrigo. Now this is the point where I don't really know who that is. I assume it's a female singer. I don't know who Olivia is. See, Taylor Swift, I could point, if you said, show me a picture of her, I could point to that. Even Drake, because the only thing I know about Drake, he's that meme, isn't he, where he's got two, that's Drake, is it? Is that the one, is that the Drake one? Right? But Olivia Rodrigo, nah. She could walk past me on the road, I wouldn't know who she was. Got no clue. Olivia Rodrigo. 2022, the biggest pop star of 2022 was some bloke or woman or band or something called Bad Bunny. No, never heard of Bad Bunny. There's these things, I mean, even when I put the radio on now, I'm putting on Radio 2, which is sort of the more conservative grown-up channel, you know. And when I was a kid, you know, Radio 2 played things like Dolly Parton and Kenny Rogers and things like that, you know, Dusty Springfield. But now it does play pop stuff, but nothing too much. And I find myself switching on to Radio 1. And on Radio 1, they've got some sort of weird stuff that I actually quite like. Most of the time, the kids' music seems to be weird. No one's heard of it, you know, and it's very genre-based. So you'll have some weird house music or some weird rap music. I don't mind that. I can listen to that. Bad Bunny? Who the hell's Bad Bunny? Shall I have a look at him up? Because I really don't know who he is. Let's have a look up the old Bad Bunny. You know, is it anything to do with that bunny in Fatal Attraction? No, it wasn't actually a Bad Bunny. Oh my God, what's this bloke here? He's some bloke. Benito Antonio Martinez Acosia. He's a rapper. He's dubbed the king of Latin trap. He's not the one who did the big show, is he, recently? Is he the one that did the big show? Because I thought that was brilliant. Let's see. Recently, they had a big, you know, like in America, they've got the old, oh, bloody hell. They've got things in America, haven't they, you know, the Super Bowl halftime show. It was incredible. He's great. I didn't agree with anything he said. I didn't agree with his politics. He was a standard, you know, going on about bloody championing whatever he was championing. I don't even know what he was championing, but I'm old and I'm against it. You know, but, I thought that show was incredible. So well done, Bad Bunny. You know, in the end, yes, you probably are the most important artist of 2022. Perhaps the most important artist of this year, which I haven't done yet, have they? So, yeah, maybe I've got it all wrong. Maybe I should actually look into these people. 2023, we get Taylor Swift again. Ridiculous. 2024, we get Beyonce again. Ridiculous. And then last year, they came up with a person called SZA or SCA. SCA, never heard of them. SCA, never heard of them. SCA, American singer-songwriter. Oh, it's a woman. Yeah. What's she like? Do I have to watch something? She did a thing with Doja Cat. She's co-written songs with Nicki Minaj. It sounds all absolutely horrible. Is she a Muslim? Is that the thing? That's what it's all about. It's not about your music, and it's what identity group you happen to conform to. So the record industry can push that identity politic on us continually, even though it's not working. But I don't want to get into all of that. It's an elite championing their values, because it makes it very difficult for the normal people like us to live out how we used to live, and it trains us to think in a certain way. And that's what I see when I look at it. It says here, her father was a fan of jazz and funk, Miles Davis, Billie Holiday and John Coltrane. But she listened to Tupac Shakur. She also likes Ella Fitzgerald. And she says that Lauryn Hill is one of her influences, and she likes the singer Ashanti. She also likes Red Hot Chili Peppers, Macy Gray, Bjork, Jamiroquai. I mean... So what's my conclusion at the end of this video, which I was hoping would only be about 20 minutes long, but again, that conclusion is I'm old. And I got a set of musical values from a certain time, and there was a shift, and it actually happened in the 90s, towards the end of the 90s. It's got nothing to do with downloading or streaming or the collapse of the music industry. It's the turning away from played music, basically. Music that's made with instruments, that's made by people in the same room playing, and that heart and soul I don't feel is here. It must have been replaced by somebody else, something else, because people wouldn't be liking it and into it. But this new generation sort of don't know about that anymore. Maybe it will get rediscovered, or maybe it doesn't need to get rediscovered, and maybe music will become something that I won't get in the same way as all the sort of jazz that came out in the 1920s, the classical music fans didn't get, and how all the rock and roll that came out in the late 50s, early 60s, the jazz lot didn't get. Maybe we just move on, and I'm getting old. And it's however much I try on this channel to do something which I feel is worthy, has some sort of is entertaining and humorous, that presents myself in a way which is warts and all, which is something I think is very important that we do nowadays to to just get out there and do it and not worry about the consequences. And I think those are all noble values. But perhaps the values I have got are dying away, as is the natural plan. And this is something I'm battling with at the moment. Since I've been doing this channel, it's been an upward trajectory, but in the last few weeks I've felt an anxiety returning that I haven't had since I started the channel, and it is the realisation of my uselessness as I look forward to just the last remnants of my life in a world which I no longer understand, which confuses me, and all these artists which seem to me to be, they just don't seem to be creative. There's no beauty there. It's all posturing. It's all posturing. And it's the values that aren't there aren't musical values. They're values of sort of tribalistic is an immorality there that's emerged. It's the immorality of the elites and the way they spin the narrative down to us, and people don't accept it anymore. They don't want it anymore, but they keep doing it. And so this is all championing a set of values which I don't think most normal people have. And that's why when you go through this, you come up against people like Puff Daddy and then Kanye West, and you think, what is this? Is this what we've swapped? But perhaps we could look at Michael Jackson and say, no, maybe he was immoral in the way he lived. I don't know. This video has thrown up more questions than answers. I do apologise for it. I knew, looking at pop music, I'd be out of my depth, in a way. But that's what it is. Maybe this is a video that I need to come back to and have a think. I think that's what I'll do. I'll go away and have a think. I'll have a think. Thank you.